The way I see commitment is it's almost like the bumper rails in bowling of how far apart are we willing to drift. And that's what commitment is like. So if we're going through a hard season and we're not feeling connected, your commitment might look like hiring a relationship coach or going on a retreat or using a tool or being brave so that you can start to come back together. Or it's being honest about when you need space. So commitment is like how far apart are we willing to drift from each other and taking action to bring you two back together. So I see a lot that leads to divorce is it's not like a one-time thing or a one-time betrayal. It's a couple that's in this a season of ebbing like this, but there's not the commitment to keep leaning in and to keep speaking the unsaid things and to getting the support and to enlisting help. And so then they just keep going this way. And then you end up with a couple that got divorced because we just drifted apart, right? And it's these tiny, tiny moments of like irritation or annoyance that gets swept under the rug that then become big things. Right? But if you can have a daily practice or a weekly relationship check-in is also great of clearing those and having those moments be seen and heard. It can do a lot to keep the waters between you two cool.
So I was recently introduced to Megan Lambert through the previous podcast guest and good friend Bindi. And Megan is very interested in sustainability, so we had a meeting set up to discuss my project with Revive. But as I learned more about Megan and her fascinating work with intimacy and relationships, I really wanted to sit down and record a conversation on these topics. I didn't know that the day before the recording would happen, I would be undergoing quite a shift in my relationships. And I didn't really have proper time to reflect on everything that was going on at the time. So after recording the episode and after more discussions with my partner, I think a change that I would make to how I framed what was going on in the relationship was I would take accountability for the fact that most of these issues were coming from the fact that I wasn't making my partner feel safe enough in the relationship, from things as subtle as just tonality, and it can be small things like that inhibit a safe space for sharing concerns. And as soon as that happens, if the other person feels they can't share and they want to be independent and deal with issues or even just withhold small grievances from themselves, that can spin things out of control. And I can't imagine how many relationships end prematurely just from a lack of proper communication and proper commitments. So this is something that has been quite an evolution in my own perspective towards sustainable relationships. And I hope that you can benefit from these insights as well.
Cool as it gets.
Nice.
Yeah.
You're due in February?
Yes, February. Nearing the end. Yeah. I'm excited about it. Well.
All right, so I'm here with Megan. Very excited to speak with you. We just had a chat about impact investing and sustainability. And Megan, you're an intimacy and relationship coach.
It's true. Yeah. I love talking about love and relationships, and I also care about the earth. And so my work is in those two worlds.
So I'll be vulnerable and candid here and share an experience that I had, because we had this episode booked a while back, and since we scheduled it, I've had a breakup and a reconciliation.
Wow. What's happening?
Yeah, the partnership ended because it seemed like there was an irreconcilable difference. And that was actually stemming from a lack of communication and some assumptions. And so, yeah, things weren't properly understood, and it led to the end of a relationship. And just by happenstance, we happened to connect and share what actually was happening. And it's crazy because if we hadn't run into each other again, it wouldn't have happened, right? It would have just fallen apart. How do you see these sorts of miscommunications and coming back together and recognizing, okay, we had these issues, we didn't think we could solve them. Now we recognize they are actually solvable, but we already broke up. when we come back together, how do we approach things? Are we the same? Or do we just treat this as a new thing, but we're new people? We have new things to focus on. Do we treat this as a trial of, we'll see how things go? Maybe what we've learned can be tackled, maybe not.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think often when couples get disconnected, it's because they're speaking like this, like they just aren't quite connecting or able to hear and understand what each other is saying. So I'm curious for you and your girlfriend, what was the irresolvable difference that came up?
Honestly, it was just the dynamics of the relationship. It didn't feel healthy. It felt like there was, in hindsight, it felt like there was something that was wrong, but I didn't know what was wrong. So I just assumed that it was not working and that our time had come to an end.
Oh,
And there's sometimes you have worked through your karma together and things start to go on the decline. And so just noticing the decline, I thought, this is maybe a good place to end it. And it seemed like a fundamental personal misalignment.
okay. Well, I definitely think relationships go through seasons where there's challenges and then you can come back together. It depends a bit on what was the dynamic that didn't feel healthy. Like, were you fighting a lot? Were you not communicating? What was it?
Yeah, not as close connection, more arguments, more irritation.
Yeah.
Intimacy wasn't as close.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned that it was coming from some withheld issues that she wasn't communicating because she thought she could deal with it on her own. And some assumptions she was making about me that were not true, that she was also holding it. She thought she could deal with it. And then that affected our connection. And I thought it was just the relationship not working. And as soon as we recognized, it's actually safe to communicate these things and to come to an understanding and to recognize what needs to be worked on, what needs to be elucidated, that it seems like there's actually very good hope.
Yeah. Amazing. It sounds like one of the biggest challenges then that you guys were facing was she had a lot of things that she was holding on to and not speaking to. And then it was simmering and creating distance. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah.
Yeah. So an invitation in this next chapter, since you guys are back together, right, is how do you create spaces where she can unload what's going on her heart and her mind and really share about that? And that's on both of you, right? It's never, any dynamic is never just one person. But in this dynamic, the thing I would invite you to look at is like, what questions or prompts or ways can you help be a really safe space for her irritations to come out? And then for her, it'd be like, how can you encourage yourself? It sounds like she's trying to deal with these things by herself, but it's still impacting the partnership. So how can you encourage her to, and that's really common. A lot of women have this like kind of radical independence. I'm going to just deal with it by myself, especially in personal growth. It's like, it's my trigger. It's my childhood wound. I'll just solve it by myself. But then in not sharing it, there's a lack of intimacy.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I was trying to take as much responsibility as I could. And I listened to a podcast, I forget the name of the guy, but he was talking about, if you're not creating time regularly to share any just kind of relationship checkups, then you're not giving that opportunity to air things out.
Totally.
And then one of the questions I learned that is so powerful is just asking this person, what's something that you don't want me to know? Because it might hurt my feelings for whatever other reason. Yeah. And so having already broken up and running into each other and just having space, totally raw, authentic, no reason to hold anything back, and just sharing everything between us, we recognize that none of these things that we disagreed on, any of the issues, were something that couldn't be worked on. And so we started off as places we're still apart. And then as we talked and shared things that when we were together, we wouldn't have shared because we thought it might ruin things. Yeah, and then that actually made it much stronger.
Sounds like you two have a beautiful opportunity to really go deeper together. And it's like this first layer of your relationship has died off in some ways, and an invitation for you two to be more honest with each other. I remember after I gave birth, my midwife recommended a practice James and I do. James is my husband. It said every day, check in, what's annoying you today? What's annoying you today? Because both of us are like, oh, we're positive, think positively. Don't everything's fine. But just that question is really helpful, because then I could have a space to talk about, like, actually, it's annoying me that you forgot to buy more diapers. Or actually, it's annoying me that, you were looking at your phone when I was talking to you. And it's these tiny, tiny moments of like irritation or annoyance that get swept under the rug that then become big things.
Mm.
Right? But if you can have a daily practice or a weekly relationship check-in is also great, of clearing those and having those moments be seen and heard. It can do a lot to keep the waters between you two clean.
Mm. And maybe it's the creating the space and knowing that that's a practice that's important, instead of just it being a reactionary thing. Because what happened before is often when we explained what was annoying us, it would trigger more annoyance in the other person. If it wasn't constructive. And so that's probably what it led to us holding things back as well.
Yeah, makes sense. I think one of the practices I love on that is emptying the bucket. Is the way I think about it. Is you just, like, one person just vents what's annoying them. This is annoying me, this is annoying me, and the other person's job is just to listen. And you don't have to fix it. You don't have to do anything about it. Or even get defensive, but just notice, like, what's happening inside your partner, and an invitation to see inside your partner's world.
I heard you talk about on your podcast that we often find, or maybe it was one of your guests, that we often find partners who have complementary triggers.
Yeah, it's
right?
only a way.
Is this something that often probably people think that that's something that you should leave a relationship for?
Yeah.
If you're just going to be constantly triggering each other. At what point do you see that as an endless amount of growth and opportunity versus an endless amount of headache? Right?
That's a good question. I think it really comes down to, too, is like, what's your why for being in a relationship? So why are you in a relationship? Are you in a relationship? Maybe you're in a relationship and you want personal growth and you really want to be triggered and to know your wounds and understand your partners and learn about communication. And that's a why for you. Or maybe you just want to be in a relationship to have a good time together and relax. Right? And those are really different whys that would lead you to choose different partners and a different way of relating. Right? And not one is good or bad. So when couples ask, like, we trigger each other a lot, is it time to break up? It's my question is more like, why would you want to be with
them? Yeah, I envisioned sort of a cycle that might be really useful of you're living together up to the point where you've really gotten the things aired out and you're annoying each other. Then you take some time apart, have some time to yourself, then maybe like a kind of reconnecting from different living situations, and then back to living together and just repeat that way. It seems like a very sustainable way to grow and heal without it being too much burden.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a very it's an overt way to understand something that happens covertly anyway in a relationship, which is this dance of, like, coming together and feeling so close, and then having moments when you're drifting apart and you need to find yourself in your own space, and then at some point you want to come back together and feel so close and then drift apart. And this kind of ebb and flow of relationship is really natural and normal. And some couples, the drifting apart's like a couple hours apart, and then they want to come back together and spend the rest of the day together. And some couples, it's like, I need to go spend a month in India meditating and doing my own thing, and then I'll come back to you. And so it's important to know for yourself, like, how big is your ebb and your flow in the relationship, and for both of you to know that.
Yeah, sometimes that might be difficult to agree on.
Yeah.
We'll end on this. How do you see commitment factoring into this when you're ebbing and flowing?
Yeah.
Maybe when things are tough, you feel like commitment isn't part of what you're there for. But that might be a deal breaker to the other person.
Yeah, I see commitment. I almost wish you could see me on video because I'm doing a lot with my hands, but
I can film you here. There we go. Here's the
So imagining you're coming together, then you come apart and have some space and some distance, and then come back together into connection and some space. The way I see commitment is it's almost like the bumper rails in bowling, of how far apart are we willing to drift. And that's what commitment is like. So if we're going through a hard season and we're not feeling connected, your commitment might look like hiring a relationship coach or going on a retreat or using a tool or being brave so that you can start to come back together. Or it's being honest about when you need space. So commitment is like, how far apart are we willing to drift from each other, and taking action to bring you two back together. So I see a lot that leads to divorce is it's not like a one-time thing or a one-time betrayal. It's a couple that's in this a season of ebbing like this, but there's not the commitment to keep leaning in and to keep speaking the unsaid things and to getting the support and to enlisting help. And so then they just keep going this way. And then you end up with a couple that got divorced because we just drifted apart. Right?
Yeah, the leaning in is so powerful.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the phrase that I heard that really made me reconsider things. It's like, here I have someone who's willing to lean in.
Yeah.
And I'm always willing to lean with someone who's willing to lean in unless there's something that we found that's critical. And so, yeah, I guess how do you, over time, as you've ebbed and flowed many times, maybe you get used to the ebb and flow and you don't build up this fear of the next ebb, right? Or you're not bracing, you're not holding back, you're not seeing it as like a trial togethering.
Yeah.
But you're just recognizing that's a cycle that's natural.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think that's also a trust you build over time as your commitment deepens and your trust in the relationship deepens. I always remember this podcast interview I listened to with Michelle Obama. She said, I'm going to be married to Barack for the rest of my life. And so if we have a bad 8 years, so it is. We still have 40 more. And I was like, a bad 8 years? Like, that's a really big season to be committed through. You know, a lot of people, I think, are like, if we have a bad week or month, then that's a challenge. So, yeah, I think it's something that deepens.
Yeah, and building that trust up with someone, I think would really resolve any commitment issues, and it'll probably make you feel much more free having that.
Yeah, and just knowing that like commitment and trust can both deepen over time, you know, and that it's a gradual process of committing to each other and to your future together as you both are kind of testing, like, how does this feel? And do I like who I'm becoming in this relationship? And do we share similar values? And it will deepen over time.
Yeah, that's so important. Thank you so much for sharing this. And is there anywhere you'd like to find you on social media or your website?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Megan D. Lambert, and then I'll make sure you have my website as well. I will say I'm going on maternity leave shortly, but I do have some pre-recorded courses. I have a podcast and I have a book and stuff, so you can enjoy my work even while I'm with my baby.
Amazing. Yeah, the beauty of the internet.
It's true.
Yeah, I'll link to all those, and thank you so much for your time. This is amazing.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Awesome questions.
Amazing.